There's a lot of great business books out there. I've read as many as I could, but the one I keep coming back to and the one that I still think holds after I read different authors and get different perspectives, the one I keep coming back to is Unscripted by M.J. DeMarco. I actually read his first book, The Millionaire Fastlane, when I was in college, and his second book, Unscripted, was the one that actually had me pull the trigger, withdraw from college, and go full on into pursuing business. But the main takeaway that I want to share with you is on chapter 32 of the book, which is the idea of the productocracy. And of course, if you're in dentistry, you could change that word to be serviceocracy. The idea is as follows. So meritocracy pulls power to the skilled, but a productocracy pulls money to the value creators. Businesses who grow organically through peer recommendations and repeat customers, compelled by a distinguished product or service not readily offered elsewhere. Another way of saying all that is your product or service contagiously sells itself. And this is at the heart of this entire book. It's sort of like a manual on how to create this productocracy. The earlier chapters are more about the mindset shifts that need to be made before you pursue this. But there are 5 elements of creating a productocracy. The commandments, he calls them, 5 commandments of the productocracy. The first being control, then entry, need, scale, and time. So the commandment of control is the idea that you must own what you create. If you have a productocracy, but you don't own it, and of course owning is also on a spectrum. You might own most of the stuff, but you don't own the channels of distribution. You might own almost nothing and just be renting out something. That would be weak control. But the idea is that you want to skew towards controlling as much as you can, because even if you're making a lot of money, things can change one day. You could be making $1 million a month on selling products on Amazon by drop shipping items that you purchase from China. And in that model, you really don't own much because the distribution is only on Amazon. You haven't diversified there. So if Amazon decides to change some terms or decides to shut down your account, or you get too many refunds, your income is just cut off because you didn't own the distribution. If the suppliers in China or wherever change, or for whatever reason their shipping comes into issues, maybe with geopolitics, then again, your income is cut out. So control is one of the crucial elements when it comes to a productocracy. I'll keep the word productocracy but understand it's also relevant to services as well. And then we get into the commandment of entry, which is if it is too easy to replicate, if there is no barrier of entry, then you're likely not going to be able to sustain the level of success that you find, even if you do create a productocracy. Because people tend to go into what is easy, quick, and cheap to achieve. And so if you find this flavor of the month or trend or something that earns you a lot of quick money, it's too easy for other people to copy you, and therefore you lose your status as a productocracy because there's a lot of imitators around. So barriers of entry are actually opportunities for us. The more difficult something is to do, the more time it takes, the longer amount of time that's required to create this thing, the more expensive it is to create, or the more difficult it is to create. It's actually very good for us. And those are things that we want to be pursuing. We want to provide something that is not easily imitatable. All right. And then the foundation, which is the commandment of need, that need must be there, and not in the sense that this is something that is static, because there are a lot of wants and desires that are being unmet. And we can go into a whole conversation about what are needs and what are wants and desires. But again, it's kind of on a spectrum. And especially in first world countries, we're very privileged where we can confuse a lot of our wants and desires with needs. We might think we need something, but actually we just deeply desire it. Or we might deeply desire something or we might need something, but we might push it away into just a want or a desire because we have the privilege of doing that. So with the idea of need, it goes down to you can manufacture and engineer need. There are a lot of people who aren't seeking out and going after things that we would consider they need because they are privileged enough not to. And he goes to the idea of value skewing here, where you look at a product as simple as something like a knife, and you would think it's very simple, but then you realize that every element of something as simple as a knife is an opportunity for you to skew the value. So first, break down all the elements. There is the handle, there are the rivets, there is the edge, there is the actual blade, there's the part on top which isn't sharp. You can break down things further and further, and when you assemble all these elements, then you can pick out and start skewing value in different areas. And this is the approach Uber took when it came to car share or transportation. There was the value skew with technology, the value skew with the drivers, the value skew with the types of cars that you can order, with the options. All this stuff is how Uber became a multi-billion-dollar business. So this approach is very similar to the Blue Ocean strategy, and both authors, the two authors of the Blue Ocean strategy and also MJ DeMarco, talk about how when you're able to value skew correctly, and he also gives you some ideas on how to start that process, that you actually widen the market. That in this approach, you're not looking to take patients or take customers from other people. What you're doing is you're creating value for people who never saw it previously and therefore weren't in the industry. But by skewing value, we're able to widen the market and get people who were previously uninterested suddenly interested in what it is that you do. All right, the fourth one is going to be the commandment of scale. Is it scalable, or is it a product that you won't, or service that you won't be able to scale? So if we think of dentistry and you doing it, which kind of lends into the next commandment, but if you are at the helm and doing every work, that is something that isn't scalable, that you are going to be capped by the number of hours you work. Sure, you can increase your fees, but the actual work that you can do is very difficult to scale. Whereas if we transition that into a different business model where now you're hiring associates, then that is one that can scale. So make sure you're setting up the model in a way that is available for scale. Luckily, dentistry is already in a great position there, but you're going to have to make some shifts from being a clinician into being more of a business owner. All right, and lastly, it's going to be the commandment of time. Is can it work while you don't? I think is the criteria. Going back to the analogy of you working in the clinic, it's going to be capped at the amount of hours that you can work. Whereas if you start hiring other people to help with that, then you can be out of the office and things can still be going on. The value can still be delivered even while you aren't working. And so the question is, can you create that? Can you create a model where you can exit and that practice is still delivering without you there? And the answer is yes. So for all of these things, let me give you the analysis that I have with dentistry. So with the commandment of control, typically, I think dentistry is in a very good spot. You typically have a lot of control when it comes to the ownership of maybe real estate might be the trickiest thing. Distribution, you don't really have to worry about. So when you can create a productocracy as a dental office, you'll not have to work on control so much. All right, next is going to be entry. I think the barrier of entry to dentistry is relatively high. It's not as insane as something like competing with Amazon or Walmart, but it's not going to be easy for someone to just get up and say, hey, I'm going to start a dental practice. So I think entry-wise, we are also good there. I'm going to get back to need because I think that is the one commandment, the one element of a productocracy that dentistry is missing out on the most because we assume need. We assume that because oral health and dentistry is something that is quote unquote desired, we kind of shift our attention away from it, which I think is the total opposite of what needs to happen. So to scale, I think scaling, we're also in a good spot. We have a lot of, the industry is set up in a way to support scale. There are a lot of organizations out there that can help you scale. So I don't think that's something that we need to worry about either. And again, back to time, which I think goes very hand in hand with scale. That is also something that there are paths laid out for us to achieve that. So down to the most important element, and if you see on the graph here, need is the foundation. It's at the bottom and supporting the entire thing. But again, we assume need. We assume that because dentistry is something that will be a need for everyone, that people are going to come. But what we find is that sure, people have a need of dentistry, but they don't necessarily have a need for what it is that you do. If you show up as a commodity, if you look similar to everyone else, you're going to have a very hard time becoming a productocracy. And so need really, the element of need, I think in dentistry is the most crucial to take a look at, which is why the approach I think we need to take is to first look at how we can skew value. The approach I take and the approach I'm building out is to take a blue ocean perspective on things, to ask what it is that the industry is doing right now, how everyone is competing, what is the status quo, what is the commodity. Let's define that. Let's break down all the elements of what's happening there. What are the factors that people are competing on, and question every element of it by starting with the ideal group of people that you want to come. Because if we just start doing it randomly, then don't be surprised if random people show up. But we want to be very intentional with who we want to attract, because that's going to dictate so much of what comes after. It's going to dictate how you feel about the patients when you treat them. It's going to dictate your staff members and how they feel. It's going to dictate even how they pay, the groups of people that you're going to be around. So this is a very crucial starting point that we should be very intentional about. And once we identify that, adjusting all the elements for and skewing value in a way that they would appreciate, and that group who was previously being underserved and you are now serving them better in a way that confirms their identity of who they are, what you're able to do is for those group of people, you will become a productocracy. For them, there will be no substitute for what you do. And that is the foundation that we have to start with, right? That is one of the theses of this entire book, is that the first thing a business should do is go and find a productocracy. That should be what takes over all of your conscious time. Like that's what you should be working towards. And so with the blue ocean strategy, after we find a productocracy, now what we can do is start fanning the flames. The productocracy is like the pilot light, and going into distribution, going into podcasts or advertising or whatever, this is how we make that fire spread faster, because a productocracy will spread. It's just going to take a long time, because if you know any exponential curve, it starts off very slow at first, but with the advertising, with the distribution, what you essentially do is accelerate that and bring that upward curve faster. One other thing that he notes that is something that I think a lot of dentists need to hear is the idea of SEO, and also his approach, his take on SEO is a lot similar to mine. We have seen the trend and the popularity of SEO for a long time now. And now in the age of AI, we have AIO, or AEO, which is basically SEO, but for AI models. What he says in the book is that the traffic that comes from search engines, because you're able to win the ranking, is very different from traffic that comes from a productocracy, because people are seeking you out. So if you get 100 people visiting your website just because you happen to be number one for dentist in Los Angeles, the 100 people on your website there are going to be very different than if 100 people came onto your website because they directly searched out your business. They directly searched out your practice. It's going to be completely different. And so the practice that invests a lot into SEO and doing the work of gamifying the algorithm in order to get a small advantage, what inevitably happens to them is that Google strikes them down. It penalizes them for gaming the system. And this happens so regularly. There's massive changes that happen all the time. But what we also find is that the practices who are being sought out over trends, that those practices are the ones that will ultimately win the game of SEO. Not the ones that are trying to manipulate the game of SEO, but the ones that are trying to be sought out. Because that's essentially how Google aligns things too. That's essentially how all search engines will align things. In AI, this is the same principle. The AI platform that will win in this aspect of providing users to the best practice or the practice that they're looking for is the one that will be able to identify how they can recommend to the searcher the most productocracy of dental practices. So the trend is always going to favor the ones who can focus on creating productocracy, and the ones who focus on gamifying the SEO system or gamifying AEO are the ones who are going to be investing in something that's ultimately going to collapse, right? So be very careful about where you invest into. I really don't see a future in SEO anymore. I think that ship has sailed. It worked very well a decade ago, but it's been a long time since then, and technology has changed a lot since then as well. All right, so that's it for this video. And to summarize quickly, Unscripted, if you haven't read this, I really recommend it. If you are a bit seasoned, if you've been doing business for a while, I would recommend skipping a lot of the early chapters that are more about the mindset stuff, but it's still a good read to go over that. It's, I think, fantastically written, very entertaining, and a good refresher of the foundations. But what you're going to find the most value in is getting a deeper understanding of what it takes to create a productocracy, getting a better understanding of the 5 elements that you need to have. You need to realize that there's a lot more control, a lot more agency for you to tweak and improve things than you might consider you have. And those are going to give you ideas on how to do that. And also just the manual and approach he has is very systematic on prototyping, on testing, on advertising, and all this stuff is very well written out and very well thought out. He isn't a guy who just creates theory. He's done it himself. He runs the Fastlane forum. I think it's called the Fastlane forum. I used to be a member on it a long time ago. But there he's also working with many millionaires, many multimillionaires, and they're always talking about business. So this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's created, I think, 2 or 3 multi-million-dollar businesses. Now he's an author. But yeah, highly recommend it. And to recap, productocracy is our pursuit, is what we should be going after when we choose to start a business or anything of that nature. We should be going towards how can we create value for people, how can we create leverage need, time, scale, control, and entry. And once we do, that is really when the next level happens. That's when we start playing a different game and start looking into things like how can we maximize distribution? How can we do all this stuff, right? But level 1 is going to be figuring out how you can create your productocracy. I've worked with a lot of dental offices, many very notable ones too, and there isn't much understanding on how to create a productocracy. So that's what my course is going to be all about. Expecting to launch hopefully within 2 months here. I'm still working on it every day, but I'm realizing how much deeper I can always go. So it's a bit of a struggle balancing depth and also getting it out to you guys as fast as possible. All right. So with that said, that's it for today's video. Hope you guys liked it. Bit of a long one, but yeah, see you guys in the next one.